Yeah, so just want to start by saying, thanks for having me. It's quite a thing really to come so far around the world. Like in a way, I couldn't be further away from where I live, and come to a place like this, and it's sort of like coming home. You come here and everybody's so welcoming and friendly, and we do the same practices, and it's like we speak the same language. It's like sort of, being part of this movement. It's like you have family in every single city in the world. It's just a really beautiful thing. Of course, like when you go to visit your family, though, you get asked to do things. I don't know if this, every time I go to see my parents, they've always got some kind of like computer problem that they need help with. And likewise, you go to any centre, you get roped into giving a talk or doing something. So it's interesting that Dhammakumara, you said why we choose to be a Buddhist. So I've been thinking a lot about over the last week about what I was going to say. Why am I a Buddhist? And I sort of agreed to give this talk, thinking like, oh yeah, I can talk about why I'm a Buddhist. And then I started to think, actually, like, why am I a Buddhist? Because I think if you've been a Buddhist for quite a while, and I've been involved since I was 13 years old, so I've been involved since I was, a young child, I kind of sometimes forget that other people aren't Buddhists. Do you ever get this? Like you'll be, I don't know, talking to some stranger and you're like, so what retreats have you got planned? And they look at you really bizarrely. I think I sort of, so I sort of have this sense that, Buddhism is so ingrained in my life and I've been a Buddhist so long. In a way, it's like I didn't really choose to be a Buddhist at all. It's like I found the Dharma and had no option but to pursue that. So I'll just tell you a little bit about how that came about. So I came along. So I'm from Colchester, little town in the UK. Anyone here familiar with Colchester? I'm sorry. It's so Colchester is it's a very small place. It's not a very exciting place. There's not a lot going on there. Our one thing that we're really proud of is that there's a zoo that's quite nice, and like people will come. This is the only thing we have. People will come, and often, being an order member, people will come from around the world to come and visit me in Colchester, and I'm like, do you like the zoo? This is all we've got. Other than that, it's a pretty uninteresting place. But we do have a Buddhist centre, and I stumbled into the Colchester Buddhist Centre when I was 13 years old. People often sort of assume that there's some great story there. What would bring a 13-year-old along to a Buddhist centre? And really, the truth is, I think I just thought that being a Buddhist would make me sound kind of cool. People would like me, and I'd seem really interesting. And, I was expecting, like some kind of Karate Kid situation. Like I'd go into the Buddhist centre, there'd be like an old dude, bald robes, he'd be sitting cross-legged on the floor, like take me under his wing. You can imagine my disappointment. So I rocked up at the Colchester Buddhist Centre. I go in, and there was two ladies having a conversation, so I walk in, and one of them was sort of a youngish woman in her 30s, and the other was this sort of elderly lady with multicoloured hair. She had like rainbow-coloured hair, like she was the definition of an old hippie. And so I walked in the door, and immediately I was like, well, this is not what I was expecting. So I walk in, and they stop and they look at me like an elephant has just wandered into the centre. Like, who the hell is this? What's he doing here? And the lady with the multicoloured hair gets up and she comes over to me. And she just smiles this incredibly warm smile like I've never seen before. just like a really, real strong sense of kindness. And she sort of looks at me like, "Can I help you?" And I just said, "Hi, I'm thinking about becoming a Buddhist." And so she laughed. I don't think she knew quite, she wasn't expecting that. And she just sort of, she laughed, and then she sort of paused and goes, "Well, I guess I better show you around then." So off we went, go looking around the Buddhist Centre, and Colchester Buddhist Centre has actually moved into a much nicer building now, but at this time the shrine room was sort of down in the basement. So we went off down this dark staircase into this basement shrine room, and which was a bit weird, but I go in and it was like a sort of cave of wonders. So I walk in and there's the Buddha Rupa at the other end, which immediately sort of caught my eye as just this really beautiful image. And then on the right-hand side of the shrine room, there was an image of the Wheel of Life. Do you guys know the Wheel of Life? Yeah. So it's like this. There's like this hideous monster holding this wheel, and on this wheel there's hell realms and God realms and animals and humans and animals in the middle, and it's a very exciting image. So I sort of like looked at this. I was like, wow, like, this is awesome. So we stood and we just talked about the Wheel of Life for ages. And I left really enthusiastic. Like, there was this warmth and kindness from these people that I'd met. And yet these really striking images, these really profound images that pointed at something which I felt was quite significant. So I rushed home and I talked to my mum, and I was like, "So, I'm going to be a Buddhist." And she's like, "Right, okay." So she was like, "Okay, I'm going to come with you to these Buddhism classes. Check these people out." So she came with me a few times. We went to meditation classes together, and after a while, she sort of was like, "Okay, these people seem quite harmless. I'm going to let you get on with that." Fortunately, this is the days before Google was really a huge thing. So I started going along to these, meditation and Buddhism classes. And there's a few things. There's sort of three things that really spoke to me, really moved me, and really sort of made me think that this is what I wanted to commit my life to. So the first was ethics, Buddhist ethics. So I hear the 5 precepts, and of course I don't know quite if it's the same in Australia, but in the UK, and especially sort of where I grew up, it's quite sort of really strong. Well, there's strong Christian conditioning. So we would sing hymns in school and that sort of thing. And so, very familiar with, the sort of Christian idea of ethics. And I think ethics is a really interesting subject because, of course, we all want to be a good person. Nobody wants to be a bad person. Nobody wakes up and thinks, how can I be really cruel today? But I think there's something about the idea of ethics, or at least what I had in mind with the idea of ethics, of it being sort of a quite an arbitrary thing. So, for example, I'm gay, which, if you're familiar with Christian ethics, can be quite a challenging thing. And I was really sort of worried, coming into a religious situation, like, oh God, what are they going to make of this is who I am as a person? What are they going to think of that? And so I had a conversation with one of the order members, and he was like, okay, completely didn't care. And I was like, oh, okay, so, tell me more about these Buddhist ethics. Buddhist ethics is, ultimately just saying, be as kind as you can be. Be as generous as you can be, as content as you can be, as honest as you can be, as mindful as you can be. And I just found that really striking, really profound, really inspiring. Firstly, because, there's no end to that. What an amazing way to live your life, to think to yourself every day, how can I be more kind today than I was yesterday. I can't think of a better way to push yourself. But what was even more striking is, these people, they walk the walk as well as talk the talk, Everyone I met really seemed to be living this way, really did seem to be thinking, how can I be more kind? Always, how can I be more kind? And they really embodied that. I was having a conversation actually with Atira earlier this evening about how when someone's really truly ethical, it can sort of instill a sense of fearlessness in you, because you're having a conversation with someone and you know that they're going to be kind to you, they're going to be honest with you, and they're going to listen to you. And that makes you feel so, or at least it made me feel, so safe and heard, and like I was having a really meaningful connection. Being a young man, that was sort of a connection that I'd never really experienced before. So the second thing that really struck me about Buddhism is meditation. So some of you might see where these three things are headed. You might have heard this threefold formula before. So I learned to meditate. And so I've been meditating every day, almost. I can count the number of days that I've missed, sort of on my fingers, since I was 13. And I don't know how people do without it. If I miss even just one day of meditation, I'm a complete wreck. It's like, my mind is fuzzy. I'm not with it. I feel like I'm on a different planet. Meditation really, I think, makes life more real, makes me feel more connected with who I am, with what I'm doing, with the world around me, with people around me. Especially the meditations we do in Shiratna. You've got mindfulness to sort of bring you into yourself, and metta to take you out to other people. Like, those two are so perfectly balanced with one another for just living a really meaningful and connected life. And so since my ordination, I've taken on, so when you're ordained in Shiratna, you get given a particular meditation practice to visualise a particular Buddha image. And mine is Vajrasattva. So Vajrasattva is the sort of like the representation of enlightenment outside of space and time. And he embodies, so he represents and embodies purity in the sense of emptiness. So purity in the sense that there's nothing to be impure. And it's a really, really amazing and powerful meditation practice where you visualise the image of Vajrasattva and imagine yourself filling up with purity and all of the sort of negative afflictions washing out of you. So that's how I start my day every day. And it's like starting the day in a sort of, like with a swim in a cool lake. I couldn't imagine my life without that sort of sense of guidance and purpose and clarity, yeah. And the more I meditate, the more I realise how integral meditation is to sort of everything that we do. So I think sort of when we first come to classes at the Buddhist Centre, it's like meditation and Buddhism are these sort of separate things. And then you start to realise, like, for example, doing the Metta Bhavana, how doing the Metta Bhavana is really important to the practice of ethics and vice versa. Because it's like it embodies, Metta Bhavana. When I first started doing the Metta Bhavana, I was like, this is just sort of nonsense. You're just sort of like you know, doing a sort of feel-good hippie fest. And then it was like, oh no, wait, there's real wisdom in this. The Metabhavana fundamentally challenges our default way of being and tries to transform it from within. Like, oh my God, you know, isn't that just like, you know, if you ever had that experience when you're meditating, when it just really feels like you are changing yourself, yeah, transforming yourself from within, getting a few nods. Yeah. So that's the second thing. And number 3 is wisdom. So the Dharma just keeps me awake at night, thinking about, so hearing about things like impermanence and compassion and wisdom and insubstantiality. These things, you know, these words, the reason I'm sort of pausing as I say each one is it's like it's so easy to sort of rattle those off. But there's so much significance in the simplest things. What I really love about the Dharma is the Buddha is saying these things which, if you hear them often at first pass, it's sort of, you're just like, well, yeah. And then you go away and you think about it and you're like, oh, yeah. You know what I mean? If you had this experience as well, yeah? Where you realise that everything, all of the assumptions that you had about life on an innate level are just delusions. I had a conversation with my mum a couple of years ago where my granddad was very unwell, and it was coming up to Christmas time, and he kept saying to us, this is going to be my last Christmas, I'm not going to make it. And I was having a conversation with my mum about this, and she was like, oh, he says this every year. Like, you know, he'll be fine. And I was like, I was thinking about this, and I was like, you realise one year he's going to be right, you know. We are all going to die. And she just like stopped in her tracks and was really like overcome with emotion at this point. And I just thought how striking that was, that how often our response to the world is to sort of turn away, to sort of close our eyes and our ears to the suffering that's in the world, and just sort of tell ourselves that everything's going to be okay. And then the Buddha's here in this very gentle, very soft, very easy way saying, no, no. And it's like there's then this huge message about the way life really is, but in this kind and gentle way that we can explore it together. And then that brings me on to sort of the next thing that I wanted to say is, you know, being a Buddhist for me is so much tied up with being part of this community. You know, I don't think I wouldn't be able to be a Buddhist, to be a practitioner without a Sangha. But I think especially this Sangha is fantastic. You know, as I was sort of saying earlier about being able to come to every city is just amazing. But also the particular emphasis that we have on friendship, I think, is so important to understanding this, to getting to grips with this, to being able to hold this and deal with it and work with it and transform ourselves. and transform ourselves in a way that sort of also transforms everybody around us. Yeah, it's such a beautiful thing to be a part of. Such an inspirational and I feel so privileged to have found the Dharma and to have found this movement, privileged and grateful to be part of this. That actually went a lot quicker than I was expecting it was going to. So I think I'll just finish there.